Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brandon Brown. I'm Master Kata Coach working for Baptist Memorial. And today is the second in a three-part series of the Shepherding Group webinars that we're conducting with Beth Carrington. And I have joining us today Skip Stewart, who would like to say a few words as we start to open the webinar.
Brandon, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here and how important this subject is of the Shepherding Group. There's not a day that goes by that I don't have a conversation with someone about this subject. I really like this slide right here because it really depicts the difficulty of building a skill. And that's what we're trying to do with our learners, our coaches, and our second coaches. And like Beth said last time, we don't want to use the Dreyfus model to necessarily label people, but we do want it to use it to help us think about the skill. One of the questions, or one of the comments that gets made to me quite often is, you know, the shepherding group is really tough. And my response is, yeah, it is. And that's why we have to have leaders involved in it. Sustainment is very tough because we're trying to create a meta routine in the way that we strive towards goals, the way we fix problems, the way we act and think on a regular basis. So I'm just so happy to be here, and thank you so much for both of you. And I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
All right. Well, thank you, Skip. Good morning, Brandon. Nice to be with you again. As Brandon stated earlier, this is part 2 of 3-part series we're doing on shepherding groups. So this slide, we talked about this slide last time in terms of developing a skill of any type requires practice. And as you practice, and you practice correctly, you move your skill from a novice level to advanced beginner to competent, proficient, and ultimately the eternal learner, or what's also called expert. And we use that Dreyfus model of skill acquisition that we will talk a bit more about that tool, the Dreyfus model tool, in today's session. But we use a Dreyfus model tool to help us assess where our skill is along the novice, advanced, beginner, competent, proficient, expert, or eternal learner scale, and really to help us understand where we need to practice to increase our skill. So we've spent the last session really talking about building kata capability in an individual, right? Where an individual would spend time as a learner and practice deeply, and then rotate to the role of a coach and practice deeply, and then rotate through the role of the second coach, hopefully building competency through course corrections from an experienced coach, really help them honing their practice to what we call perfect practice and deliberate practice, meaning stepping into that role and with intent, understanding and recognizing that I'm practicing something new. And through that series of rotations with perfect practice and deliberate practice, our skill level will go up. We will build individual capability in kata skill. But today, what we're going to start talking about is how do we build kata capacity, meaning more than one individual within the organization. How do we build capacity across an organization? And so to build kata coaching capacity across an organization, we bring in what we call a shepherding group. A shepherding group really helps an organization determine where we're going to be practicing kata in pursuit of which strategic initiatives and who will be practicing. We'll talk a bit more about the shepherding group and the role of the shepherding group in today's session. Then we're going to talk about a 5-month period when an organization is just getting started, or even where a new Kata team is beginning to practice, where we go through this 5-month of Kata skill development. And there's different phases. We call them months, but put months in parentheses. It might take longer than an actual calendar month to accomplish this. But the first phase, the first month, is we really spend time just making sure people follow the desired pattern of practice. Then month 2, our attention and focus of the shepherding group in particular turns towards the quality of practice. Month 3, we really begin to spend time on the second coach role and the development of some real second coaching skills, practice those skills, so that by the time we're into that 4th month, we're really ready for a self-assessment of our Kata skill. And again, not to, as Skip reiterated, not to label someone as having novice skill or having advanced beginner skill, but really to help those practitioners understand where they could practice more deeply to advance their skill. Then the 5th month is the shepherding group does skill assessment to determine that the organization and specific practitioners are able to go into the expansion phase, where we go to the next wave and begin to practice maybe in a new process area in a new department with new practitioners. And we have actually skilled coaches that can help in that expansion in developing skill in new areas with new people. And the ultimate goal is kind of this phase, that last phase, phase D, which is just building a common meta routine, a routine way of thinking and acting across the entire organization at all levels in all areas. So that's the subject matter for today. So let's begin. We'll start by having a conversation about the shepherding group. So we're going to start here. We are here now. Then we will, so the shepherding group is charged with actively monitoring and guiding the organization's Kata development and expansion across the organization. And a shepherding group usually has typically, and it varies, but around 5 to 7 members. It has executive sponsorship. Membership is definitely preferred. And we mean by membership where we have executive sponsors participating in the shepherding group reflection sessions and helping steer and guide Kata expansion across their span of control, across their organization. And experience shows if it is best if the shepherding group members have practiced Kata as a learner, a coach, a second coach, and have really mastered the skill. If not all members, at least some of the members of every shepherding group should have Kata skill. The role of the shepherding group is to steer the development, set challenges, and actually Kata the Kata. These shepherding groups that you see depicted in the photos have storyboards, such as the one here, and this is at Golden Triangle specifically, but this is their shepherding group Kata storyboard. So we actually Kata to deploy our Kata. Shepherding group membership evolves as Kata expansion occurs. You have exceptional coaches are developed and brought into the group. The membership kind of ebbs and flows depending on where the expansion and where the focus is. And exceptional coaches are typically individuals that are avid learners, adapting Kata mindset, and therefore can assist the shepherds in teaching, coaching the desired mindset across the organization. So there is oftentimes an overarching shepherding group, let's say at an entity level. Take a hospital setting. We would have a top leadership shepherding group, but there might also be shepherding groups subservient to the overarching shepherding group, such as the nursing, in-house, inpatient nursing could have a shepherding group that manages all of the Kata activity within the inpatient floors, inpatient units. There could be a shepherding group that manages the back office activities. Think of it as kind of a value stream shepherding group going all the way from, let's say, a scheduling department to insurance verification and pre-certification and pre-registration of patients to admissions all the way through billing, where one shepherding group monitors the Kata activity across those various functions to help the organization achieve strategic initiatives. And the shepherding group is the group that really helps determine and steer that activity. So this shepherding group sets the challenges, determines the processes, determines who's going to practice, and then they begin to work with those practitioners through their awareness phase, getting them sent out to, in the Baptist world, get out to take on the domino challenge, some real awareness activity going on. They may also read the book. They may watch some videos. They may go and watch others practice. But the new practitioners go through the stage of awareness. Then they're ready to begin their practice. So now with our new Kata practitioners, we are here. And the shepherding group would make sure that the practitioners are following the desired pattern of practice. And the desired pattern, typical desired pattern of practice, is that the learner, the coach, and the second coach show up at the storyboard, and the coach goes through the 5 categories of questions, asking the learner to, what is their target condition? In our current condition, what's our actual condition now? Have a conversation, a reflection on the last step taken. What was the last step? What did you expect to happen? And then you can get into what actually happened and what did we learn from taking that step. Then there's a conversation about what obstacles are preventing you from reaching the target condition. Which one are you addressing now? And what's your next step to overcome that obstacle? And then the last question is, when can we go and see what we've learned from taking that step? And the coach would ask the learner those questions at their storyboard. And we see that the desired pattern, that should be about 15 minutes. And then the coach and second coach, the learner is excused many times. That's up to the coach and the second coach and the learner, but we typically release the learner, and then the coach and the second coach have a feedback session. And there's a second coach card. We'll walk through that in today's presentation. But that takes about 15 minutes to get some really good feedback from a second coach on what the coach could practice more deeply and really help guide their learner in their skill development. Then while that's going on, the learner is excused, and they'll be doing their experiment. They'll be taking that next step. And we see that as being around 30 minutes. We want to learn how to develop steps that can be done within 30 minutes. And then the learner should take a period of time to reflect on what they actually learned from taking that step, developing their next step, and updating their storyboard so they're ready for tomorrow's coaching session. And in the workday, what we see that looking like is we have coaches that have the circle represents their full workday. And it's an already busy workday. But what we're trying to do is find a wedge, right? Drive a wedge into that already busy day to open up time, just about 15 minutes to spend time with our learner in a coaching cycle, and then spend about 15 minutes time with our second coach, getting effective feedback. And the learner's day is going to be about an hour of new activity, wedging that hour in, 15 minutes of coaching, 30 minutes to do the experiment, 15 minutes to reflect on what they learned, design their next step, and update their storyboard. So while the practitioners are going through this desired pattern of practice, the shepherding groups are actively monitoring the activity, the kata activity, to assure that the desired pattern of practice is occurring. I always just say the first focus of a shepherding group is to just make sure people are showing up at the storyboard. It sounds simple, but it's harder than we would think. People do already have a very busy day, and we have to work at embedding this new practice into our day. So the shepherding group is out there actively monitoring and working with the practitioners to make sure our desired pattern of practice can occur. And they're setting up target conditions that have the desired pattern of practice and some metrics that would go along with that, like the desired number of PDSA cycles, the desired number of coaching cycles, the desired number of second coaching cycles. Maybe there's some target process metrics around the number of times shepherds are attending and second coaching various katas they're responsible for. And are they really achieving their desired duration of practice? I think we've all seen it, where we begin to, a new practitioner may begin to run experiments, and their experiments or their data collection is taking 2 hours. Well, that's not really sustainable, right? And the shepherding group is trying to create sustained improvement through an engaged organization. And if our practice is taking too long, it's not going to be sustainable in an already busy day. So this first month is about embedding practice in our daily routines. And there is a tool to assess the pattern of practice. It's this tool. It's a PDSA coaching cycle tracking record, where the number of coaching cycles or PDSAs for this learner is tracked for this coach and for this second coach. It's what the number of days is for. So if a month's practice, if we're working 5 days a week, a typical shift 5 days a week, that would mean our learner would be having 5 PDSA cycles every week. And so a monthly, they would have 20 PDSA cycles. So this chart, this tool, is a way to track that. What dates are they occurring? How much time is the learner and the coach in minutes actually spending in the coaching cycle? And then how much time is the second coach spending giving feedback to the primary coach? We want to track that. Then we want to track how much time the learner spent on their PDSA cycle. Are those PDSA cycles even close to our desired pattern of 30 minutes? Then we want to make sure that the learner is spending time on reflection, designing the next step, and how much time are they spending updating the storyboard. So they would record the time there. And then if the second coach was present, some initials here so we know who was there. And then also, was there a shepherd present? And we'll put some initials there. And then maybe track some reasons why we're not getting to our PDSAs and coaching cycles. These oftentimes can become a source of obstacles or barriers that have to be overcome. And again, this pattern of practice is all about changing the way we think, right? It's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking than to think your way to a new way of acting. So you just have to jump in and do it. In this first month, that's where most of the focus occurs.
And Beth, if I could just add one thing, a tip that I have some people that I coach forget to do this. They're trying to use the form. And one of the tips that I've given them is just right before you hear the question, what is the target condition? Make sure someone just pulls out their iPhone or their Samsung or whatnot, go to the stopwatch feature and just hit start. And then when the last question is asked, when can we go and see what we've learned from taking that next step? They hit stop, they write it down right then, and then move on to do the same thing for the second coaching cycle. And I found it interesting that groups that actually do that will actually put the minutes and the seconds in the column, and which is telling me when I go up and look at it that I know they are timing their cycles. Well, like you said, what's most important is that we're looking at, say, the time the learner spent on reflection and design the next step. If it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, what we're wanting to know is what's going on when the external coach or when the shepherd's not there. And if that time is too short and we're not making progress toward the target condition, then that's something the shepherd or the second coach may want to start paying attention to and asking, when are you coming to the board to start that? And so I've given the learner the same tip. When you come back to the board with your results of what happened, start your own stopwatch and start writing what happened. And they'll be surprised if you'll just practice that habit of starting and stopping a stopwatch. Pretty soon, if you're doing it effectively, you are taking 10, 12, 15 minutes to do an adequate reflection, update the obstacles, and then decide which one am I working on, and then making sure the rest of your board is set up and ready with the next step and expectation, and then hit stop. And surprisingly enough, a lot of people find out that we are not spending enough time doing reflection when they start actually timing them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Particularly also on the as you mentioned, the second coach feedback. Are we really giving adequate time and thought to giving feedback to our primary coach? Again, that role of the second coach is to develop the coach, and we need to dedicate time to that role and that feedback. And you're starting to get into now when we start talking about updating the storyboard and listing the obstacles, you're starting to get into the next focus for a shepherding group, which is, we talked about practicing in a sustained manner, right? We need to be spending time in the right activities and at a high enough frequency that it begins to become habitual in nature. If we're practicing sporadically, we're only practicing once a week or once every 2 weeks, we're not actually beginning to embed or habitualize the behavior, and it's going to be harder and harder to embed it in our already busy day. So again, it's about practicing in a sustained manner. And now that leads us into kind of the next phase. So month one, the shepherding group is really working with the teams and the new practitioners on their pattern of practice. The next month is really spent on the quality of practice. So Brandon, if you want to take it from there, talk about the quality storyboard quality checklist.
Sure. So Beth just explained the pattern of practice that shepherds really should be using themselves when they're in month one, as well as what they should be looking for in others during that first month. And I'd like to talk about what the shepherd should experience and also should be looking for others as they go to the boards and evaluate months 2 and month 3. So at month 2 is where we would like you to focus on really this quality of practice. The pattern and the flow of the learner storyboard should begin to be more routine now. The questions should come almost habitual, as Beth said. The learner is flowing through the board. The flow is starting to get sustained. So we want the first coaches and second coaches to really start looking for some key quality characteristics that show evidence of the linkages of the parts of the storyboard. So the first coach should be thinking beyond just the starter 5-question card at this point. You know, the questions that are on there, they're not the only questions that you can ask in front of the board. So in the second month, there are really 2 main questions we want the shepherds to be looking to answer on how coaches should be actually challenging the first coach. And the first one is, so what makes for a good quality linked storyboard where it's all connected? The second question really that a shepherd would be looking for a second coach to be able to answer, and even the first coach, is how does the coaching kata start to evolve to a deeper level? And so we've got a learner storyboard quality checklist in this slide, and I reviewed that as well in the second coach notebook webinar. You can go out and look at that webinar presentation. We review it briefly there as well. And it's what we call the learner storyboard quality checklist. Now, it's not a literal checklist, but rather a mental checklist the learner, first coach, and second coach should all be doing with this mental model, which we refer to as an overall meta routine. This is so that we can do what's in that lower left corner there, create sustained improvement through an engaged organization. So first, as the learner reads through the target condition, the coaches should be reflecting on the alignment with the target condition with the challenge in the upper right there. Does this target condition really relate and it's going to help us move closer to the challenge? In other words, if we operate the process as described in this target condition working pattern, as it indicates in number 1 under the target condition, we will be moving closer to, or at least in the direction of, the challenge. And if not, the shepherd might question the first coach and second coach in a second coaching session on clarifying that linkage, as shown on this storyboard checklist. So next, if we can't operate according to the working pattern described in the target condition, does the obstacle clearly identify a few things? One is, does it identify the gap between the current and target condition working patterns? Also, does the obstacle really do what it says in the box there? Are they listed indicating the learner is addressing, the obstacle being specific, not vague, and should no solutions or lack of solutions be listed? In other words, the obstacles need to relate back to the target condition. And
yeah, Brandon, could I jump in?
Sure.
Sorry. I want to just reiterate, because you said something just really, really important. There's a reason the arrow goes from the obstacle to the pattern of work. It doesn't go generally to the target condition. It really goes specifically to the pattern of work. And I think that's one of those items, I think you mentioned it in your obstacle webinar, is the obstacle isn't just to the metric.
Exactly.
The obstacle is to the pattern of work. So it isn't random that arrow goes specifically from obstacle to desired pattern of work.
Exactly. We're wanting to see where's the breakdown on why we can't operate in the target condition. That's exactly what the question said. What's keeping us from reaching the target condition? That's the obstacle definition. And if you refer back, as Beth said, to the webinar I did on continuously improving the way we write obstacles, main questions you're looking for there is the obstacle vague? In other words, are there just a few words there? Or does it make a grammatically coherent sentence? Or is it in the form of the way I have some people that are practicing, form a question that really needs them to find more information because they don't fully understand their current condition? And so that might be the start of the go and see, so that we can then more directly define the target condition and really start to make some traction and some movement. And then thirdly, another way of writing the obstacle is, does it describe the facts and data and the negative outcome, the negative result, or does it describe the gap that we're trying to close between the working pattern that we have in the current condition and that desired working pattern in the target condition? So the next linkage that the shepherd would be looking for, as well as the coaches, is, does the PDSA, does it address, or should address, as the arrow points there, back down to the obstacle, the PDCA should address a specific obstacle to achieving the target condition. So that linkage we ask ourselves after the learner answers the question about the step and what they expect, if we look back down at the obstacle and ask ourselves, is this PDCA addressing this specific obstacle? Then great, we're working in the pattern and the quality of practice is improving. Many times it's not. Sometimes I see beginner learners, advanced beginners or novice learners brainstorm first. They'll write down, well, I've got a step today and I've got to have something ready for my coach. So they'll write the step first and then they'll look at their obstacle list, if they even look at it sometimes, and then move the arrow right before the coaching session. And I call that pinning the tail on the obstacle. I like pin the tail on the donkey. We want to identify the obstacle first and then move toward that fourth step, that last step, which is, okay, now that I understand that obstacle, what can I do to overcome it? That's the real key there. And my final point is that coaches and shepherds should be looking for and listening to completing this mental model of the triangle form between the target condition, the obstacle, and the PDCA. If we're checking at each coaching session with this triangle linkage, then we should be performing a high quality coaching cycle when it comes to improving the quality of our practice. So as we move then on to the month 3, the second coach development really begins to become important. And as we move in there, shepherding groups should be introducing really some second coach skill development. And we have a couple of things that we want to point out about second coach development. Really, what is the role of the second coach? And that's to develop the skill of the Kata coaches. We really are looking for them helping the Kata coach to recognize their learner's threshold of knowledge. That's a new vocabulary word for a lot of people, and people sometimes have difficulty with it. It's new language. And so what we're simply referring to is, if you look at some of the slides in the second coaching notebook and in the second coach's notebook webinar that I did, we talk about pictorially, are we operating in that green zone, that comfort zone? Are we out there in the yellow zone where we're exploring and learning new things? And are we going to break new ground and start working closer and closer and experimenting with this target condition working pattern? The coaches should also be steering the learner through true experimentation and expanding that threshold of knowledge, not having steps like have a meeting and discuss something with somebody or send an email and verify this and calling it a go and see, but really the coaches should be steering the learner to move from go and sees more into exploratory experiments. Are we attempting to run in the target condition pattern as closely as possible? That's where we really start to expand that knowledge threshold. And then the last thing, helping the coach develop the skill of their learners, showing them through that second coaching cycle where they missed an opportunity to maybe show that triangle linkage that we just talked about, or maybe improving the way that they write the obstacles. But the second coach needs to be seeing these things, and many times it takes practice to get there. So what should we be doing during the cycle? In the second coach's notebook, we have a tool here, and it's just merely a tool for the second coach. And it's best explained, I think, by what it is not. This tool is not meant to be for capturing the entire learner and first coach dialogue. You just simply can't. In this third month, the cycle is still going through fairly quickly. You can't write down everything. It's not necessarily meant to distract you as a second coach from understanding that linkage between the obstacles, the PDSAs, and the triangle, that mental model. What it is for, the main purposes of it are to put we want to capture quick shorthand notes where the first coach either is making that linkage through a clarifying question, or are they deviating from the card? Did they skip a question? And then what does the learner say? Maybe there's a note or a response that the second coach picks up on that they might say, that sounds like an obstacle. So whatever point in the conversation between the first coach and learner they say that, you might make a quick note. Sounded like an obstacle, and then write the word there. So that's the main purpose of this sheet. And finally, as the first coach is evaluating, are we recognizing that knowledge threshold?
Sorry.
It's okay. So there's a second coach card that we put together that's available for you to use. It's a tool. It basically asks a series of questions, and it gives you really a starter kata, much like the 5-question card, It gives the second coach a series of questions that helps you to determine, is that first coach engaged? Are we identifying that knowledge threshold as we step through this card? And if we are, then where is that knowledge threshold and how can we tell? The coach would then go through a series of what the coach is wanting to pay attention to as they came into this coaching cycle. We want the coaches to come there having maybe briefly reviewed the storyboard and have some intent, or maybe from the last session, there's some intent of skill development that they're looking for in the learner. And if the coach doesn't have that, or just answers that question with some random statements, then you might, as a second coach or shepherd, start to coach that they really didn't seem engaged about guiding that conversation around the Kata storyboard in a certain direction. It also gives you an opportunity to state your observations, and then what do you want to pay attention to as a coach for this learner and then going into the next coaching cycle. The flip side of the card basically has the definition of the knowledge threshold. It's the point where the learner has no other information or facts, starts to guess and say, I think, or maybe, or I'm not sure. It could be a 5-minute savings. I'm not sure, but I'm estimating that, as well as the 3 types of experiments that we're looking for. And in some cases could be a go and teach. And another tool that we have for the second coach as they start to develop this skill and start to pay close attention to how the coaching is moving into more quality level. In the notebook, this card is also shown here in a notebook form with some lines out to the side. So as that observation sheet, when you finish kind of making your shorthand notes, the second coach might pause and say, give me just a few minutes and write down in the middle of the page, I observed, and write down what they have observed at that point. As we go through the questions 1, 2, 3, I just mentioned on the card, these are exactly the same. And I've seen some coaches that have, in their second coach notebook, go ahead and write down what did the coach say yesterday they want, or the last time I was here, what did they want to pay attention to going into this coaching cycle? Some coaches are pre-populating that question number 3 so that they know what the coach just said yesterday they were looking for. And if the answer is incorrect, they might remind them and say, you said you were looking for how they write obstacles, but you just said you were looking for moving toward exploratory experiments. So we want to make sure that there's a linkage, because this series of questions forms a loop from the previous session to the next session. And please, as coaches, second coaches, or shepherds, use this to write your notes down to what is the coach telling me out there to the right side. What are they telling me about this? Did they complete the triangle of the storyboard checklist? Does it seem like the first coach has an understanding of that triangle linkage? Again, remember the main purposes of that observation sheet was for shorthand. Here's where you start to expand and give really some detailed notes about that coaching session that you can refer back to. It's just merely a tool to help the shepherd or the second coach, and it's intended that the second coach and first coach use this tool and help the second coach develop other Kata coaches that are under their care. So we're going to move into month 4, and Beth's going to talk to us about self-skill assessment.
Thanks, Brandon. Okay, so this pattern, this 5-month pattern, is for our new practitioners. And again, it's the shepherding group's focus as these new practitioners rotate through all of the roles. So about the 4th month, they should have been through the role of the learner, the role of the coach, and the role of the second coach if they're following the rotation schedule of 1 month in each of those roles. And that means they've looked at Kata, in the improvement Kata, from all 3 perspectives: as a learner, a coach, and as a second coach. And so month 4 is about each individual assessing their Kata capability. And there's a skill assessment form we use to assess that. And at this point, we want the Kata practitioners to perform a self-assessment of their skill, learner skills, and coach's skill. And as we go through the desired behaviors, novice, advanced, beginner, competent, and proficient, this exercise of self-assessment is intended to be a learning experience in and of itself. And you want to not just do the assessment once, but continue to assess your skill. Again, you're trying to step into the role and deliberately practice a new behavior, which says to yourself, you have to recognize this as something new. So you begin to deliberately practice it. And so you're going to use the self-assessment tool, not just once, but over the course of your skill development as a learning experience in and of itself. And again, the purpose is to direct the practitioners to specific behaviors they should practice to improve their skill, not to label, but to really help recognize, if I practice, maybe it's the link between, I need to practice the link between a process metric and an outcome metric. Maybe that's where I need to practice to evolve my skill and move through the ranks of novice, advanced, beginner, competent, proficient, and eternal learner. This is a tool. It's only a tool. It's data dense, but that in and of itself makes it a learning exercise. And it is broken down into the generic categories: direction, current condition, target condition, obstacles, PD, SA. And then what it's broken down into individual skills within each of those categories. And then we have the skill from novice to advanced, beginner to competent. Proficient is on the scale as well, but proficient just means you can demonstrate competent skill in a multitude of situations. And the only way you can demonstrate skill in a multitude of situations is that you have to spend time practicing and exposing your skill to new processes, new opportunities, maybe even new challenges. So that means in a short phrase, it takes time to develop proficiency in any skill. And so this is just one tool. Again, it's a tool that you would use, self-assess. Sometimes teams do this together. They do it as a team because you've had a learner, a coach, and a second coach practicing with each other for about 3 months. And so they do a team assessment, but it's really about just digging into the tools, digging into the behaviors and saying, when I demonstrate this behavior, I'm demonstrating novice skill and I need to practice. Or I've moved from novice skill to advanced beginner, I need to practice a bit more, and you'll see yourself moving into that competent skill level. So the next month, it isn't done all at one time. You take a month, you run through the assessment, and the shepherding groups would be monitoring this to make sure that people are doing their skill assessment. And that moves us into the 5th month. The 5th month, now we have the various shepherds that are working with the various practitioners. They do a skill assessment and say, yes, indeed, this coach is demonstrating competent behavior, Kata behavior. They're ready to take on a new learner. And that's really the role the shepherding group is going through in the 5th month, is determining who does have the skill to help the organization expand Kata into a new area, maybe a new process, a new department, or against a new strategic initiative or challenge. And again, you use the shepherding group would use the same skill acquisition tool, skill assessment tool, and they would determine in their ranks who really has that competency. They were aware, novice, they were able to do, showing some advanced beginner, skill level. But they're really now at that higher competent level where now they're able to coach. And the shepherding group will determine who those people are so they can step into the next phase of Kata capacity building, which is expansion. So Brandon, I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you talk about the expansion
Okay,
phase.
thank you, Beth. So as Beth mentioned, now we have an assessment. We know that we have some coaches that are capable of coaching other teams or other katas in their area. How do we expand? And so now we're in the 6th month of developing kata coaching capacity. And if we've done the first 5 months correctly, we are ready for expansion. However, one thing I'd like to say is if we're lacking coaching capacity or we don't believe that we're ready with our coaching bench strength, we need to revisit our coaching development from months 1 through 5. In other words, we don't want to outrun our headlights because we'll end up not doing the theme in the lower left corner, creating sustained improvement through an engaged organization. So I've had some directors, some higher level second coaches that have said, I want to rotate back through and be a learner again. I see now that I've been through this for these first 3 to 5 months that I could have done a better job, and I'll deepen my understanding if I go back through that. But as we expand and we move past scouts into shepherding groups, one of the most important things to note really on this pictorial slide is about what Beth focused on months 1 through 3, and that is that we have our senior person start their practice in the role of the learner, then the first coach, and then the second coach. If you should see on the slide there, they're rotating through so that they end up in the natural reporting order of the organization. The natural process owner may start as the coach. The manager, the unit manager, may start as the second coach. And then as that senior person makes that rotation through these other two roles, the coach would then, the natural process owner, move to second coach and then end up as a learner. The second coach as the manager moves into the learner in the next month, or as Beth said, could take longer than a month, but eventually their path is to end up as coach. And so that's how you expand through this rotation. And I can't stress enough, it doesn't work if the senior person doesn't experience all 3 phases and all 3 roles. I've had groups that have said, well, we could get so-and-so to do it because they're a director or manager of this, and they've been through Skip's Dominoes class, so they understand kata, and they watched the board for a while, and let's go have them shepherd another board over here. They can't recognize that triangle linkage because they didn't make the mistakes and they didn't make the PDCA and the linkages themselves. So assuming the senior person has successfully progressed here, then the shepherds and the external coaches can expand to this next wave of deployment and start to move into other areas. One thing that I would like to say here also is that when we're ready for expansion, and we say that someone is competent, or maybe they're even moving toward proficient level on that Dreyfus scale as far as their kata skill, their kata coaching skills, many times we've taken people from one area that it's not their core clinical or non-clinical competency and put them on to a group that is outside of their comfort area. In other words, we've had a lab manager that is coaching a CLAPSI board. We've had a respiratory therapy director move to the materials board and coach a materials board and shepherd a materials board. And that really helps deepen that person's understanding because they have to really ask those questions. Show me the linkage. They may not fully understand the process that they're looking at. And so they have to look deeper and make sure that the practice is being, again, it's in month 2, a quality level of practice. So as we start to move down through the organization, the reason why this slide, this pictorial slide, is so important of what the expansion through the various levels of the organization should look like as we move from managers to supervisors on down into the head nurses and the other non-clinical areas that we really start to be able to produce this throughout the organization. Notice as we deploy through each level, we get closer to the frontline supervisor, we get closer to the process owner, and often we refer to that as the Gemba. where the action's at. We're moving the kata now into where it's really close to where patient care, patient satisfaction, the quality of care, the four rights, we're getting closer to being able to execute that up and down the organization. So I'm going to move now back to this meta routine across the organization. Remember, it's the primary goal of the shepherding group to get to this level over a 6 to 18 month time frame, so we can accomplish really two things: that we can create this meta routine across the organization, and again, we can create sustained improvement through an engaged organization. So I'd like to turn the webinar back over to Beth, and she's going to take us further through this meta routine and building an organizational keystone habit to culture change.
Thanks, Brandon. The ultimate end game is this truly having a developed meta routine throughout the organization. As you said, Brandon, it's a routine or kata for all levels and all areas of an organization. The coaching kata, expanded in all levels of an organization, develops what we call catch ball. It's a catch ball routine along the chain of accountability or chain of command. So as one level develops a challenge and a vision and ultimately a target condition towards in their direction, that higher level target condition sets the direction for the next level in the organization. And they developed their improvement kata against that challenge, and their activity sets the challenge or direction for the next level throughout the entire organization. And then the next level, their kata activity feeds the direction to the next level. And that implies that there is coaching going on. So this manager is a coach to the supervisor, but they're also a learner to their director. And this director is indeed a coach to their manager, a second coach to the supervisor, but they're also a learner to their next level up. And it's through those coaching routines, the asking the 5 category questions and learning more deeply about their processes, and learning more deeply about their challenge, that feedback rolls back up the organization and down the organization to the process level. Think of it as oscillation of information and goal setting and linkage and alignment is occurring throughout the organization. And that's the meta routine that we're really striving to achieve. And it takes time to change culture, to build this meta routine as not just something else we do, but just the way we go about improving our process. And that begins to get to what we call this keystone habit that Brandon referred to. And it comes out of a book called The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And it's centered around the concept of it's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking than to think your way to a new way of acting. So with the kata, it's simply saying just do it. And it begins to create what Skip refers to. You'll hear him talk about this over and over again. It's a mental model that we're striving to achieve, where I can take on a challenge. I do not yet know how I'm going to achieve it. And I can break that challenge down into daily steps, daily experiments that I can take to move, like I like to say, the peanut forward, right? Just a little up every day, experimenting my way to overcome obstacles, to achieve a target condition on my way to that challenge that I have no idea how I'm going to achieve it. And what we're trying to do is just create in all of our areas this keystone habit of the improvement kata, coaching kata. And a keystone habit is a habit that you perform that everything else flows around, right? We all have habits, some good, some not so good, but we all have habits, and what we want to do is create improvement kata, coaching kata as that keystone habit that everything else flows around. And what we'll be doing is, again, you'll be building capacity over months in the future, right? These first few months, you start out with a small number of people, and then you go into month 4 or 5, you start to expand, and 6, 7, 8, you expand some more. After the next year, you're expanding, you're developing more coaching capacity, which means out here you can start to get some exponential growth. And the shepherding group is there managing this expansion, building towards that meta routine over the course of months and actually years. And as you move out in time, in the future months, at the beginning, individual processes, the rate of improvement from a process perspective looks very steep, right? You get great gains right up front, but you always continue a steady, continuous improvement. But from the shepherding group standpoint sometimes, or the larger organization, or what we call on this slide the enterprise, the rate of improvement might look something like this, because we're not getting to all of our processes, a higher magnitude of processes, until some months out. So from a process level, you get a great improvement curve perspective, but from an enterprise level, it may begin to, over time, have higher impact as you get more teams and more people practicing the improvement kata, coaching kata. And that pretty much wraps up the subjects for today's webinar about the key role and routines of a shepherding group. The next time we come together, we're going to walk through 5 key factors, just through our experience, show that if the shepherding group really focuses on these next 5 key factors we're going to talk about, it harbors success, right? And what begins to happen is, again, everybody just begins to embed kata behavior as something else I do or something I just do in my day. Not something else I have to do, but just something I do in my everyday routines. It's embedded as that meta routine. And so with that, Brandon, you want to close us out for today and
Sure.
wrap it up?
Sure. So what we want to keep in mind, as always, with all of the shepherding group webinars that we're doing, regardless if it's the first series, second series, or the third series, is the shepherds are out there, the second coaches are out there. Everyone that's practicing kata is showing us their thinking. That's the main thing that we're looking for, is you have to show us your thinking for us to be able to coach this and coach this effectively. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.